Tonight, we begin with a development that federal authorities, immigration experts, and legal analysts had feared, monitored, and debated: a coordinated IC operation that unfolded not over weeks, but in a matter of hours. Hours that resulted in multiple arrests across the city. Hours that exposed previously hidden networks of illegal activity. Hours that drew national attention to ICE's enforcement strategy. What ICE agents did today crossed a line that some local officials had hoped would hold. And when that line broke, Fox News reporters did not hesitate. They captured the operation with intense focus, unprecedented access, and real-time reporting. For weeks now, there have been whispers of increased enforcement activity. Not in press releases, not in public statements, just quiet movements of IC teams, that agents are preparing something aggressive. ICE has been methodical, yes, but they have been relentless in their enforcement strategy. Their moves have followed a certain pattern, a protocol, almost a signature style. But what set off alarm bells in Minneapolis law enforcement circles this morning was that the usual procedural chatter went silent. Immigration policy analysts who monitor IC activity know the indicators: the sudden increase in surveillance vehicles, the rerouting of officers to targeted neighborhoods, the quiet vetting of local records, the sudden absence of routine briefings. All of that went quiet. And whenever IC goes quiet, it means something is about to get loud. Early this morning, federal monitors detected what they described as covert deployment of tactical units, including mobile command centers and undercover officers that had not been active in over 6 months. These are the kinds of assets and personnel that IC only deploys when they are signaling something very specific: targeted residential raids, coordinated workplace inspections, immediate arrests of high-priority subjects. Observers didn't know which category this fell into, or whether it fell into all three at once. But what they did know was that IC was shifting posture from standard enforcement to high-intensity operations. And when a federal agency shifts posture without explanation, even slightly, local authorities and policy experts pay attention. The alert issued by IC this morning was not normal. It was not routine. It was not symbolic. It was urgent. Federal briefers, after a strategy meeting, described the operation as meticulously planned, rapidly executed, and, perhaps most importantly, high risk due to targeting multiple vulnerable networks simultaneously. But enforcement only works if the target hesitates. Local officials and suspects did not. In fact, their response today was among the fastest reactions we've seen during recent IC operations. Here's what we know. Within hours of the first alerts, ICE agents moved into several neighborhoods. These weren't the routine detentions. These were precision raids, coordinated teams, and surveillance systems that IC only deploys when preparing to take high-value targets off the grid at night. Fox News confirmed that IC launched simultaneous raids on multiple suspected illegal housing networks, including properties recently flagged for harboring undocumented workers, believed to be central hubs for illegal labor operations. ICE moved swiftly before any local tip-offs could alert the main suspects. They hit residential homes. They hit warehouses. They hit commercial sites that were likely preparing to facilitate illegal employment practices. In other words, ICE targeted critical nodes of an expansive network. The intelligence and evidence that would have made it operational were seized. This is what made the federal warnings so urgent. ICE's move wasn't just symbolic. It was actionable. It represented the kind of enforcement that could dismantle illegal labor networks if left unchecked. And IC, understanding that fully, responded with force. Not recklessly, not impulsively, but strategically. They didn't alert all parties prematurely. They didn't overextend personnel. They hit primary suspects. They hit supporting locations simultaneously. And here's where the story becomes even more revealing. Policy analysts now believe that ICE's latest move was designed to test the reach of local opposition after repeated delays from city-level legal pushback. ICE wanted to see whether local advocates and community groups would intervene or slow the process. But instead, the opposite happened. Opposition groups didn't obstruct the raids. They monitored quietly, taking note of federal decisiveness, which was so coordinated, so rapid, that even suspects noticed. You don't get ICE's attention easily, but today they did. An immigration analyst speaking under anonymity described the shift as surgical enforcement, a way to send a message about operational reach. ICE proved today that they remain both strategic and relentless. Their actions were not only precise, they were measured so precisely that suspects were unable to evade capture. That coordination matters because it shows federal enforcement is capable of simultaneous high-stakes operations. It shows that ICE is not reactive. They are proactive as reports continue coming in throughout the day. We learn more about the scale of ICE's response. Local ICE squads carried out raids on residential complexes, forcing immediate detentions. Workplace teams targeted warehouses and food processing sites that had been operating illegally for months. Federal units operating across the city reportedly intercepted transport routes used by suspects to move undocumented workers. This wasn't just a handful of arrests. This wasn't just routine enforcement. This was full-scale operational precision. This was federally coordinated action. And this is the one thing illegal networks have struggled to maintain since city-level enforcement efforts began. For every advance they made, ICE countered with strategic, timed, and coordinated moves. Remember, ICE thought local resistance would slow their progress. They thought legal challenges would delay arrests. They thought community interference would compromise operations. But tonight, the exact opposite is happening. Operations ran on schedule. Targets were detained efficiently. Federal presence dominated enforcement zones. What makes this moment so high stakes and so critical is that ICE's latest move happened while immigration leadership faces political scrutiny. Community groups want leniency. State officials want adherence to civil rights. Federal lawmakers want enforcement clarity. Media outlets want transparency. ICE is balancing these demands while carrying out rapid, high-risk operations. And when leaders in that position make sudden moves, they're not doing it from strength. They're doing it from pressure. They're doing it from necessity. ICE's official statement, now released via press briefing, was designed to signal that the agency is not willing to allow illegal labor networks to expand unchecked. Officials said plainly that the raids were necessary and lawful actions consistent with federal priorities. That is direct language for, we will enforce the law regardless of local pushback. You don't usually hear that tone unless something serious is at stake. Meanwhile, IC director addressed reporters in a firm, direct speech tonight. He said, "Our mission is to protect communities while enforcing the law." He said, "We will not allow organized illegal networks to operate freely." And he said, "Every action taken today was necessary and precise." These are statements from an entity that understands just how high the stakes have become. Here's what makes the situation even more concerning. ICE's latest move wasn't isolated. Along with today's raids, transportation monitoring units also increased patrols. Federal prosecutors prepared charges against key operators. Local IC field teams increased surveillance of suspect networks. All of this happened within the same 24-hour period. When IC moves multiple pieces at once, it means a larger enforcement strategy is underway. Analysts are now considering several possibilities. One is that IC is preparing broader regional enforcement operations. Another is that IC is attempting to dismantle local labor exploitation networks fully. A third possibility, the one worrying officials the most, is that IC is attempting to set a national precedent for high-intensity raids. But today, ICE took that card off the table. They didn't delay operations. They didn't allow local interference. They didn't signal weakness. They acted decisively and efficiently. What we're watching now is a test of federal enforcement capability. ICE wants to see how local networks respond under pressure. Opposition wants to see how quickly IC can execute complex operations. Federal authorities want to prevent unchecked illegal activity. Community groups want to prevent civil rights violations. Tonight, we've heard from field reporters who are now monitoring ongoing follow-ups. They say dozens more suspects are under investigation. They say local authorities are cooperating fully. And they say ICE's decision to move quickly and simultaneously is likely part of a broader federal enforcement strategy intended to send a message nationwide. But IC is not slowing down. In fact, ICE is showing operational dominance. Their response today, calculated, precise, and rapid, sent a message to illegal networks that federal oversight is absolute. And it sent a message to the public that law enforcement is fully engaged as the evening progresses. We expect more details to emerge about what exactly IC hoped to achieve. But what we do know is that federal coordination was timely. It prevented escape of high-priority suspects. It disrupted illegal labor networks. And it demonstrated the agency's capability to execute complex operations. What happens next will depend on what suspects do in the coming days. If they resist, this moment will be remembered as a defining federal intervention. If they comply, ICE has already shown they are ready to respond. They have shown they are ready to act. And tonight, for the first time in months, illegal networks appear to be scrambling. The streets of Minneapolis are quiet, too quiet. And when activity is quiet, it means federal authorities are still in control. It means they are choosing their next move carefully. Because tonight, suspects learn something they have learned many times. ICE enforces the law relentlessly. Federal coordination is unmatched. There is no safe space for illegal operations. This story is far from over. But tonight, one thing is clear. Federal enforcement is strategic. Federal enforcement is swift. Federal enforcement is uncompromising. And we will be here, watching every detail as the next phase unfolds.